Welcome to the Boring Podcast. Tonight we'll calmly talk through something that happened, perhaps, or didn't. If this helps you drift off, we've done our job. Feel free to do nothing at all.
Yes, indeed. Tonight we'll be discussing something quite, ordinary. Something you might encounter in everyday life, yet likely overlook. We'll be delving into the often unconsidered world of shelf depth. Specifically, the options one might encounter when, say, purchasing a shelf or designing a built-in unit. It's a topic ripe with, shall we say, subtle nuances.
Shelves. They hold things. Books, perhaps. Ornaments, maybe. The possibilities are almost, numerous when you think about it. But before you even get to what goes on the shelf, you have to consider the shelf itself. And a key element of that is the depth. How far back does it go? That's what we'll be exploring. Slowly. Very slowly.
Now you might be thinking, shelf depth? How much is there really to say about that? And that's a perfectly valid thought. It's a seemingly simple concept, but, as we'll uncover, there's more to it than meets the eye. More than just a few inches here or there. The depth of a shelf can truly impact its functionality and, dare I say, its aesthetic appeal. Or perhaps not. We shall see.
We're not talking about height here, not how tall the shelf is. No, that's a topic for another, equally unexciting podcast perhaps. And we're not talking width either, how long the shelf stretches. That's a whole other dimension, so to speak. We're talking strictly depth. Front to back. How far in can you put things before they hit the wall? Or fall off the back? It's a fascinating, if somewhat limited, area of inquiry.
Imagine a very shallow shelf. So shallow, in fact, that only the spines of books are visible. Now imagine a very deep shelf, so deep that you could practically lose things in its recesses. Two extremes, yes, but between these extremes lies a whole spectrum of depths, and each depth serves a particular purpose, or perhaps no purpose at all. It's all very subjective, you see, and rather dull if I'm being honest.
Consider the standard bookshelf. Often found in homes, libraries, perhaps even offices. These shelves typically have a depth of, say, 8 to 12 inches, enough to hold most standard-sized books comfortably. But what if your books are larger? Or smaller? What if you want to display something other than books? Suddenly the question of depth becomes more, pertinent.
And let's not forget about the space you have available. A deeper shelf might hold more, but it also takes up more space. A shallower shelf might be less capacious, but it can fit into tighter spaces. So the choice of depth often involves a compromise, a trade-off, a delicate balancing act between functionality and spatial constraints. It's a real dilemma, isn't it? Or perhaps not.
Indeed. So, as you can see, the seemingly mundane topic of shelf depth is actually quite, something. Something to think about, anyway. Or not. Perhaps you've already drifted off. And if so, we've achieved our goal. Less than / person 1 greater than. Less than person 1 greater than. We have, of course, the standard shelf depth. Now, standard can mean a lot of things, can't it? Standard in one context might be entirely non-standard in another. We could spend a whole episode discussing the meaning of standard. Perhaps we will someday. But for now, let's just imagine a shelf. A regular shelf. The kind you might see in, say, a pantry. Or perhaps a cupboard. Not too deep, not too shallow. Just standard. A place to put things. Canned goods, perhaps. Or boxes of pasta. The usual suspects, so to speak. This standard depth is, standard. It serves its purpose. Nothing remarkable. And that's perfectly fine. Sometimes, standard is exactly what one needs.
And then there are the deeper shelves. These are for when you need more space, perhaps for larger items. Perhaps you have bulk goods like large bags of flour or rice, or maybe even larger appliances you want to store away. These deeper shelves provide that extra room, that extra capacity. They can be quite useful, these deeper shelves. Or perhaps you have a collection of, decorative plates. Or perhaps old board games. The possibilities are, numerous. But they're not endless. There are limits, of course. Even the deepest shelf can only hold so much. We must remember that. But still, more space is often appreciated, wouldn't you say? It allows for more storage options, more possibilities.
Oh, and the shallower shelves. We mustn't forget about those. These are for smaller items, perhaps. Small decorative objects. Spices, perhaps. Small jars. Things of that nature. They don't take up much space. These shallower shelves. They can be quite practical in certain situations. In a smaller room, for instance, where space is at a premium, or perhaps in a bathroom, for toiletries. Shampoo bottles, soap dishes, things of that sort. Small things. They have their place. Everything has its place, doesn't it? Even small shelves. Even very small shelves. They serve a purpose. Just like the standard shelves and the deeper shelves. Each has its own function. Its own purpose.
Considering the varying depths of shelves really makes one think about space, doesn't it? How we use it, how we organize it, the different ways we can arrange things. It's quite fascinating, in a way. Or perhaps not. Perhaps it's just shelves. But even shelves can be a source of contemplation, if you think about it long enough. The different sizes, the different depths, the different purposes they serve. It's all quite something. I don't know the right word. Just something. It's a thought. A thing to consider. Shelves. They exist. We use them.
Sometimes you might even find adjustable shelves. These are particularly versatile, wouldn't you agree? You can change the depth depending on your needs. One day you might need a deeper shelf, the next a shallower one. These adjustable shelves cater to that flexibility. They adapt. They change. They are not fixed, not static. They are dynamic. In their own way, of course. Not dynamically dynamic, but shelf dynamic. Which is in itself a kind of dynamic. A specific, shelf-related kind of dynamic. It's all rather nuanced.
Thinking about all these shelf options, it's almost overwhelming, isn't it? So many choices. Standard, deep, shallow, adjustable. How does one decide? It's a question for the ages, really. Or perhaps not. Perhaps it's a simple matter of practicality. What do you need to store? How much space do you have? These are the questions one must ask oneself when considering shelf depth. Practical questions. Sensible questions. Questions about shelves.
One might even consider the material of the shelf itself. Wood, metal, plastic. Each material has its own properties, its own strengths and weaknesses. Wood might be more aesthetically pleasing, while metal might be more durable. Plastic might be easier to clean. These are all factors to consider. Factors that contribute to the overall shelf experience. The experience of using a shelf. Of interacting with a shelf. It's more than just depth, isn't it? It's a whole system, complex interplay of factors.
And then there's the question of installation. How will the shelves be installed? Will they be freestanding, or will they be attached to the wall? This is another important consideration. It affects the stability of the shelves, their weight-bearing capacity. It's all connected, you see. The depth, the material, the installation. It's a whole ecosystem. A shelf ecosystem. It's quite remarkable when you think about it. Or perhaps not. Perhaps it's just shelves.
As we were saying, or rather, as we alluded to earlier, the topic of shelf depth presents itself, or rather, it arises, in a multitude of ways, or rather, in various forms. We can consider, if one is so inclined, the standard depths, the non-standard depths, and the depths that fall somewhere in between, and within those categories, we find a further subdivision, a further nuance, a further gradation of millimeters, or perhaps even centimeters, which can make all the difference when considering the placement of objects, items, or things upon these shelves. This is not, I reiterate, a matter of great urgency, but a matter of meticulous detail, a detail that we will now further unpack.
Yes, the unpacking of these details, these minute distinctions between, let's say, a shelf of 12 inches and a shelf of 13 inches, a single inch, seemingly insignificant, can be the determining factor in whether or not a particular item, say a book, a vase, or a small decorative figurine, will fit comfortably, or perhaps precariously, upon the aforementioned shelf. This is not a matter of life or death, of course, but a matter of placement, of arrangement, of the overall aesthetic harmony of the shelving unit within the larger context of the room, the house, and perhaps even the neighborhood. One must consider these things.
Indeed, the neighborhood. One might even go so far as to say the wider community, the societal implications of shelf depth. But perhaps that is a discussion for another time. Let us return to the matter at hand. The inches, the centimeters, the millimeters that separate one shelf depth from another. We were discussing, I believe, the standard depths, the commonly found measurements that one might encounter in a typical retail establishment purveying shelving units. These standard measurements offer, in a way, a sense of familiarity, a sense of comfort, a sense of knowing what to expect. But within that familiarity, there lies a subtle complexity.
This subtle complexity, as you so aptly put it, lies in the very nature of standardization itself. What is standard, after all? Is it a fixed, immutable value, or is it a fluid, evolving concept, subject to the whims of fashion, the dictates of practicality, the ever-shifting sands of consumer preference? These are questions that we must grapple with, ponder over, and perhaps even meditate upon, as we consider the seemingly mundane topic of shelf depth. One might say, it's deeper than it looks.
Deeper than it looks, indeed. A profound statement. A statement that speaks to the hidden depths, the underlying complexities of a topic that, on the surface, appears so simple, so straightforward, so utterly boring. But as we have discovered, or perhaps rediscovered, there is more to shelf depth than meets the eye. Much more. We're talking about functionality here. We are talking about aesthetics. We are, dare I say it, talking about the very fabric of existence itself.
The fabric of existence, woven together with threads of varying lengths, widths, and depths. The shelf, a microcosm of the universe, a miniature representation of the vast, unknowable expanse of space and time. And within that microcosm, within that miniature representation, we find the question of depth. The question of how much space, how much emptiness, how much nothingness lies between one surface and another. It's a question that has plagued philosophers and physicists for centuries, perhaps millennia.
Centuries, millennia, the vast sweep of time itself. And yet, here we are, discussing shelf depth. It is a humbling thought, a thought that reminds us of our place in the grand scheme of things. We are but small beings, occupying a small space, on a small planet, in a vast and indifferent universe. And yet, within that small space, we find ourselves drawn to the question of shelf depth. It is a question that transcends time and space. It is a question that speaks to the very core of our being.
The core of our being, the essence of our existence, the fundamental question of how much space we need to store our belongings, our possessions, our trinkets and treasures. 12 inches? 13 inches? Perhaps 14. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. Or perhaps it's sitting quietly on a shelf, waiting to be discovered. One might say, waiting to be shelved.
Shelved. Yes, a fitting end to this particular thread of our discussion. The items, placed upon the shelves, of varying depths. A simple act, yet fraught with meaning. A mundane task, yet imbued with significance. The placement of an object on a shelf. A small gesture, perhaps, but one that speaks volumes. Less than person one greater than now. Regarding shelf depth, standard shelf depths, you see, tend to fall within a certain range, wouldn't you say? We're talking inches here, not feet, generally speaking. You have your shallower shelves, perhaps suitable for smaller items, like, say, small decorative objects, or perhaps a few paperback books. Then you have your deeper shelves, which could accommodate larger items. I'm thinking of things like, perhaps, larger hardback books, or maybe small storage bins. One could even place a small potted plant on a deeper shelf, provided it's not too large, of course. And sometimes, you find a shelf that's, well, somewhere in between. Not too shallow, not too deep. It's a Goldilocks sort of situation, you could say. Although, I've never actually read that story. Perhaps I should.
Yes, the in-between shelf depth. A versatile option indeed. Not too deep, not too shallow. Just right, as they say. Suitable for a variety of items. Not just books, but also other things. Things one might put on a shelf. It's a broad category, really, when you think about it. What constitutes a shelf item? A question for the ages, perhaps. But we digress. Shelf depth. It's a practical consideration, isn't it? One must choose a depth appropriate for the intended purpose. A shelf for displaying small figurines would require a different depth than a shelf intended to hold, say, encyclopedias. Or, perhaps, a collection of vintage ceramic thimbles. I once knew someone who collected thimbles. Fascinating, really.
Thimbles, you say? Interesting. I've never given much thought to thimbles, to be honest. Are they typically made of metal? Or perhaps some other material? Ceramic, you say? I suppose that makes sense. But back to shelves. Adjustable shelves offer a degree of flexibility, don't they? You can adjust the spacing to accommodate items of varying heights. Quite practical, really. One could even store items of non-uniform height on the same shelf, provided one adjusts the spacing accordingly. This allows for efficient use of vertical space, wouldn't you agree?
Efficiency. Yes, a key consideration in shelf design. Maximizing storage capacity while maintaining accessibility. A delicate balance, to be sure. Adjustable shelves are certainly a boon in this regard. One can customize the shelf spacing to suit one's specific needs. A shelf for tall vases, for instance, would require a different spacing than a shelf intended for shorter items, such as, say, small boxes. Or perhaps stacks of folded handkerchiefs. I have a rather extensive collection of handkerchiefs myself, mostly cotton but a few linen ones as well.
Handkerchiefs. Practical items. I recall using them frequently as a child. Less so these days, I suppose. But I digress. Shelf depth. We were discussing shelf depth, a critical factor in shelf selection. Too shallow, and items may topple over. Too deep, and space may be wasted. It's a matter of finding the right balance, wouldn't you say? A Goldilocks scenario, perhaps. Not too shallow, not too deep. Just right.
Precisely. The Goldilocks principle applied to shelf design. A fascinating concept, really. Finding the optimal depth for a given purpose. One must consider the size and shape of the items to be stored, as well as the overall aesthetic of the shelving unit. A deeper shelf might create a sense of visual heaviness, while a shallower shelf might appear more delicate. It's a matter of personal preference, I suppose.
Aesthetics. Yes, a valid point. Shelf design is not solely about functionality. Appearance matters as well. One wouldn't want a shelf that clashes with the surrounding decor, would one? It's a matter of coordination, of creating a harmonious visual environment. I once spent an entire afternoon rearranging the items on my shelves, trying to achieve the perfect balance of form and function. It was a rather tedious process, but ultimately rewarding.
Tedious, perhaps, but necessary. The pursuit of order in a chaotic world. A noble endeavor, wouldn't you agree? And, speaking of order, have you ever considered the various methods of organizing items on a shelf? Alphabetical order, by size, by color, the possibilities are endless. I myself prefer to arrange my books by genre, with fiction on the top shelf and non-fiction on the bottom. Although, I do make exceptions for oversized books, which I place on a separate shelf altogether.
Organizing. Yes, a crucial aspect of shelf utilization. A well-organized shelf can bring a sense of calm and order to a room. I find it quite satisfying to arrange items neatly on a shelf, creating a visually pleasing display. It's a small thing, perhaps, but it can make a big difference in the overall ambiance of a space. I once spent an entire weekend reorganizing my pantry shelves, arranging the cans and jars in alphabetical order. It was a surprisingly therapeutic experience. Less than / person one greater than. Less than person one greater than. So we were talking about shelves, specifically the depth. And, there's a range of depths to consider, which can be, quite a consideration. We started with the shallowest shelves, those barely deep enough for a single paperback, perhaps a small decorative item. These are good for narrow spaces, hallways maybe, or if you just don't have much to store. They exist. They serve a purpose. Or maybe they don't. Sometimes it's hard to say, thinking about all that empty space behind the single row of books. Or maybe not books, maybe just one very small, very specific thing. Dust collectors, really. Or not, maybe very clean. It depends, I suppose.
Yes, the shallow shelves. A practical choice in some situations, less so in others. Think about it. A shallow shelf, perhaps 8 inches deep, enough for a small potted plant, a few picture frames, a single row of identically sized books, spines all aligned perfectly. Or not. Maybe just leaning haphazardly. No judgment either way. Or perhaps just a single solitary object, a singular seashell, a smooth gray stone. One thing. Not two. Just one. And all that unused space behind it. The air, just sitting there, undisturbed. Unless someone sneezes, I suppose. Then, a bit of a disturbance. But it settles quickly. Back to stillness. Anyway, shallow shelves. They have their place.
Then we moved on to the mid-depth shelves. The standard, if you will. Enough depth for a couple of rows of books, or perhaps some larger decorative items. More versatile, certainly. But also more potential for clutter. More space to fill. More decisions to make about what goes where. Sometimes simplicity is best. A shallow shelf, one row of books. Or a deeper shelf, rows and rows of books. It can be overwhelming. The options. The sheer number of options. So many choices.
The mid-depth shelf. The workhorse of the shelving world. A practical choice for most situations. Enough space for a few books, a small stack of papers, a decorative box or two. Perhaps a small, framed photograph. Or a collection of small, framed photographs. Arranged neatly, or perhaps not. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. The possibilities are there. Existing. Not infinite, but numerous enough. Enough to be mildly interesting, perhaps. Or not. Perhaps just another shelf.
And then, the deep shelves. So much space. So much potential. But also so much responsibility. What to do with all that depth? Rows and rows of books, of course. Or storage boxes. Neatly labeled. Or perhaps a combination of both. The possibilities are, if not endless, then at least extensive. One could get lost in the contemplation of it all. Lost in thought. Staring blankly at the wall, considering shelf depth. It happens.
Deep shelves. A haven for the avid collector. A repository for the things. The accumulated things of a life lived. Books, boxes, bins, baskets. All manner of containers, filled with more things. Things within things. A nested doll of stuff. And all that space. All that potential. The potential for organization. Or for chaos. It's a gamble, really. Deep shelves. A commitment.
So yes, shelf depth. A seemingly simple topic, but as we've seen, or heard rather, there's actually quite a lot to consider. From the shallowest of shelves, barely deep enough for a whisper, to the deepest, capable of swallowing entire collections, the choices can be numerous, and the implications, well, they can be profound. Or not. Perhaps we're overthinking it. Perhaps it's just a shelf. A place to put things. Or not.
Indeed. We've covered, in some detail, the various depths of shelves, from the shallow to the deep, and all the subtle variations in between, each with its own advantages and disadvantages, each suited to a particular purpose, or perhaps no purpose at all. Simply a shelf. Existing. Occupying space. Holding things. Or not holding things. Just being a shelf. It's something to think about, isn't it? Or maybe not. Perhaps it's time for a nap.
We have, of course, the standard depth. The standard depth is, well, standard. It's the depth you'd expect a standard shelf to be. Not too deep, not too shallow, just a regular, average depth. Sufficient for most everyday items, I suppose. Like books, or perhaps small decorative objects. Things of that nature. Nothing too large, mind you. The standard depth wouldn't accommodate anything overly bulky. But for your average, everyday items, the standard depth is generally sufficient. One might even say perfectly adequate. Though adequacy is, of course, subjective. But in this context, we can consider the standard depth to be adequately adequate.
Then there's the slightly less standard depth. This one is a bit of a conundrum, isn't it? It's not quite standard, yet not drastically different. It occupies a sort of in-between space, a liminal zone of shelf depth. Perhaps a few centimeters less deep than the standard. Just enough to be noticeable, but not enough to be truly significant. A subtle difference, barely perceptible to the untrained eye. Yet, it exists. This slightly less standard depth serves a purpose, I'm sure. Perhaps for smaller items, or for spaces where a full standard depth shelf might be too intrusive. Who can say, really? The mysteries of shelf depth are vast and complex.
And then, we move on to the deeper depth. Now, This is where things get interesting, or as interesting as shelf depth can get, I suppose. This depth is, as the name suggests, deeper than the standard depth. Considerably so, in some cases. Suitable for larger items, perhaps, larger books, thicker files, bulkier objects. The possibilities are endless, or at least more numerous than with the standard depth. One could even store multiple rows of items on a shelf of this depth. Imagine that. 2 rows of books, side by side. A remarkable feat of shelf engineering, or perhaps not remarkable, but certainly worth considering.
Let's not forget the shallow depth. The shallow depth is, predictably, shallower than the standard depth. This one is often used for display purposes, I believe, for showcasing small, delicate items. Figurines, perhaps. Or small potted plants. Things that wouldn't require the full capacity of a standard depth shelf. It's a minimalist approach to shelving, one might say. Less is more, as they say. Though in the case of shelf depth, more might sometimes be preferable. It all depends on the specific needs of the shelver, I suppose.
We should also discuss the extra deep depth. Now this is getting into specialized territory. This depth is reserved for the truly bulky items, large storage boxes, heavy equipment, things of that nature. Not your average everyday items, to be sure. This depth is for the serious shelver, the one who needs maximum storage capacity. It's a commitment, choosing the extra deep depth. A statement of intent, a declaration of one's shelving needs. A bold choice, to be sure.
Consider the custom depth. Ah, the custom depth. This is where the true artistry of shelving comes into play. The custom depth allows for complete freedom of expression in the realm of shelf depth. Any depth imaginable is within reach. A truly bespoke shelving experience, limited only by the laws of physics and the structural integrity of the shelving material itself. A world of possibilities, waiting to be explored. The custom depth is the ultimate expression of individuality in the world of shelving. A blank canvas upon which to paint one's shelving dreams.
And what about adjustable shelves? The concept of shelves that can adjust, adapt, transform. Shelves that can shift and change their depth to accommodate the ever-changing needs of the modern shelver. A marvel of engineering, or perhaps just a simple mechanism, who can say? The important thing is the flexibility, the adaptability, the ability to customize one's shelving experience on the fly. A dynamic shelving solution for a dynamic world. Truly remarkable. Or perhaps not, but certainly worth mentioning.
It's important to note the insignificance of all these options. These depths, these measurements, these seemingly endless choices, they're all just variations on a theme. Slight deviations from a common standard. Ultimately, they all serve the same basic purpose: to hold things up, to keep objects off the floor, or to provide a surface upon which to place our belongings. And in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter if that surface is a few centimeters deeper or shallower? Probably not. But we've spent all this time discussing it anyway. And perhaps that's okay. Perhaps there's value in contemplating even the most mundane aspects of our existence. Perhaps.
We were talking about shelves and the different depths they can be. Not all shelves are created equal, you see. Some might be shallow, barely deep enough for a small paperback. Maybe a travel-sized tissue box. Others could be quite deep, capable of holding larger volumes. Encyclopedias, perhaps. Or those large art books with glossy pages. And then there are the shelves in between. The ones that hold the average-sized novels, the standard biographies, the cookbooks. It's a whole spectrum of depths, really, when you think about it. And we are thinking about it, aren't we? Thinking about the depths of shelves, slowly, calmly. It's a lot to consider. In its own way.
Yes, the depth of a shelf is a significant factor, wouldn't you say? I mean, you wouldn't want a shelf that's too shallow for your books. They'd stick out precariously, always threatening to tumble off. A minor inconvenience, perhaps, but an inconvenience nonetheless. And, on the other hand, a shelf that's too deep can be wasteful of space. You could fit more things in that space if the shelf wasn't quite so deep. It's all about finding the right balance, the Goldilocks shelf, if you will. Not too shallow, not too deep, but just right. It's quite the conundrum, and we're pondering it. Slowly, gently, drifting along on a sea of shelf depths.
It's almost philosophical, isn't it? This whole shelf depth business. It makes you think about the nature of containing things, of organizing space. We put things on shelves, we arrange them, we categorize them. It's a way of imposing order on the world, a small act of control in a chaotic universe. And the depth of the shelf plays a role in that, a subtle but important role. Deeper shelves for larger items, shallower shelves for smaller ones. It's a system, a logic. We're creating order. Slowly, methodically, one shelf at a time. So many shelves, so many depths.
And what about the things themselves, the things we put on these shelves? Do they determine the depth, or does the depth determine the things? It's a chicken and egg situation, almost. Do we buy books to fit the shelves we have, or do we buy shelves to fit the books we own? It's a question that has plagued philosophers for centuries, I'm sure. Or maybe not. Perhaps I'm overthinking it. But that's what this podcast is for, isn't it? Philos. Overthinking the mundane, the everyday, the shelf depths. Just letting our minds wander, slowly, peacefully, among the shelves.
Thinking about shelves can lead to thinking about other things too. Boxes, for instance. Containers of all kinds. Drawers, cupboards, closets. They all have depths, don't they? Some are deep, some are shallow. It's the same principle, really. Containing things. Organizing space. It's a fundamental human activity, I suppose. We've been doing it for millennia. Putting things in other things. And now, here we are, talking about it. Slowly. Calmly. Letting the thoughts drift in and out. Just thinking about containers and their depths.
It's all connected, isn't it? The shelves, the boxes, the drawers. It's all part of the same tapestry, the tapestry of organization. We weave it together, thread by thread, shelf by shelf, box by box. It's a never-ending process, this organizing, this containing. And it's all so very calming. Just thinking about it, slowly, methodically, letting the thoughts wash over us like a gentle wave. Shelves, boxes, drawers. It's a world of containers.
Sometimes, I think about the vastness of space, the endless expanse of the universe. And then I think about a shelf. A simple, wooden shelf, and it seems so small, so insignificant in comparison. But then again, isn't everything small and insignificant in the face of the infinite? Perhaps the shelf is no more or less significant than a galaxy. It's all relative, isn't it? Just thinking about it. Slowly, quietly, letting the thoughts drift like dust motes in the air.
And what about the things we don't put on shelves? The things that don't fit, the things that are too big, too small, too oddly shaped. Where do they go? Do they have a place in our organized world? Or do they exist outside of it, in a realm of their own? It's something to ponder, isn't it? Just letting the mind wander. Slowly, aimlessly, through the vast landscape of unshelved things. It's a big place, perhaps bigger than we imagine.
It's getting late, isn't it? Perhaps we should talk about something else. Or perhaps not. Perhaps we should just sit here, quietly, thinking about shelves, boxes, and the vastness of space. It's all very calming. Less than, person one, greater than. Less than, person one, greater than. So we've touched upon the shallower shelves, suitable perhaps for smaller items, like, say, a small decorative object, or a few slim books. Not large ones, of course, but smaller ones. And then we moved on to the, let's call them mid-range depth shelves. These could accommodate slightly larger items, maybe a stack of papers, or a modestly sized plant, assuming the pot isn't overly wide. We haven't really addressed what overly wide means, have we? Perhaps we can circle back to that later, or not. It's not crucial, really.
Yes, the varying depths are a consideration, aren't they? A shallower shelf might not be practical for certain items. Imagine trying to place a moderately sized storage container on a very shallow shelf. It likely wouldn't fit, or it might protrude precariously, which wouldn't be ideal. We want stability, generally speaking. No one wants items falling off shelves. That would be disruptive. And we're aiming for the opposite of disruptive here. We're seeking calm. And a sense of, nothingness almost.
Nothingness is a good way to put it. And then, of course, there are the deeper shelves. These are designed for larger, bulkier items. We haven't discussed specific examples yet, have we? We could, if you like, although it hardly seems necessary. A larger shelf holds larger things. It's quite self-explanatory when you think about it. Perhaps we've exhausted the topic of shelf depth. Perhaps not. It's hard to say, really.
We haven't even considered the materials the shelves are made of. That could influence the depth options, couldn't it? A stronger material might allow for a deeper shelf. Or not. It's all rather speculative at this point. We could delve into material science if we wanted to, but that might be too engaging. We want to maintain the dullness, the lack of excitement. Shelf depth, in the grand scheme of things, isn't very exciting, is it?
No, not particularly. And even within the realm of shelving, depth is just one aspect, isn't it? There's height, width, the material, as you mentioned, the color, the finish. The possibilities are, well, they exist. We could go on, I suppose. We could spend hours discussing the minutiae of shelving. Or we could just not. The choice is ours. Or perhaps it isn't. It's all rather ambiguous, isn't it?
Ambiguity is good. It's restful. It doesn't demand anything of us. Just like these shelves, really. They just are. They exist. They hold things, sometimes. Or they don't. It depends on whether you put things on them, I suppose. Which is another topic altogether, isn't it? The act of placing items on a shelf. We haven't even touched on that.
We could discuss the optimal arrangement of items on a shelf, maximizing space utilization, categorizing by size or color, considering the weight distribution. It's a whole other realm of nothingness, really, like a vast, empty shelf, waiting to be filled, or not. It's a rather profound thought, if you think about it, or perhaps not. It depends on your perspective.
Perspective is key. From one perspective, a shelf is just a shelf. From another, it's a platform for potential, a blank canvas for organization, or a horizontal surface upon which to rest items. Temporarily. Or perhaps permanently. It all depends, doesn't it? And on what exactly does it depend? That's a question we may never answer. Or perhaps we will. Eventually. Or not.
Thank you for joining us. Let go of the day and drift softly into rest. There's nothing more to do. Nothing more to think about. Just this moment. Just your breath. Just peace. Sleep well.
Good night and sweet dreams.